Now we are going to talk about loops in Java. A loop is a programming structure that repeats a block of code until a certain condition is met. There are four main types of loops in Java which we are going to see in this video, namely while loop, do while loop, for loop, and augmented for loop. So let's see examples for each of these different types of loops. I am going to use each of these different loops to write a simple program that displays the multiplication table for a given number from 1 to 10. So let's start by declaring a variable to store the number which we are going to be multiplying. I am going to initialize the number to 5. Now let's start with while loop. A while loop is a loop which checks a given condition before execution, and the body of the loop is executed so long as the specified condition is met or not met as specified by the program. So we are going to use a while loop to display the multiplication table for our number from 1 to 10. I am going to declare another integer variable called I, which is going to be used for iterating through our loop. So I will just declare the variable for now, and you are going to see how we will use it throughout the loop in order to understand its use better. And I'm going to assign this to 1. Okay, now to use the while loop, you start by writing the while keyword followed by a set of parentheses, and then within the parentheses I will write my condition. My objective is to display the multiplication table from 1 to 10 for our variable called number. So what I'm going to do is I will say, since the variable I is assigned to 1 already, I'm going to give my condition as I less than or equal to 10. So the reason I am saying I less than or equal to 10 is because since I is already 1 and I want to make my multiplication table to range from 1 to 10, it means that so long as the value of I is between 1 and 10, the loop will continue execution. So this is the condition for this given while loop, and once the value of I is no longer in this specified range between 1 and 10, it means the loop is going to stop execution at that point. So I will follow this with a set of curly braces, and then within the curly braces we are going to write the body of the loop. So my objective is to print the multiplication result of our number by each number between 1 and 10. So I am going to display this multiplication table. So I have displayed the message number, which is 5, and then times I, which is 1 at this level, and then it is equal to number times I. So this is where the multiplication is actually done. Now what we have to do after this is we need to increment our variable I. As we already saw how to use increment operators, I will simply write I plus plus, and this is going to increment the value of I. So after carrying out the multiplication of number by I, which is 5 times 1, we are going to display that result. 5 times 1 is going to be displayed as 5, and then after that operation we are going to now increment I by 1. It means we are now incrementing I by 1, which means I is going to be 1 plus 1, which is going to be 2. So notice that this is done at the end of the body of our while loop, and after this the loop simply comes to an end. Now what will happen is that this is going to be executed once, and then the value of I will be incremented and the loop ends. But since it is a loop, its automatic behavior is that it is supposed to repeat itself multiple times again. So once the loop ends here, it is going to come back to the start and execute the same lines of code which are in the body of this loop. But during the first iteration, we incremented the value of I at the end of the loop with this line, I plus plus. So this means the loop will be incrementing. The value of I is no longer going to be 1 again, but it is going to be 2, till it is going to reach a point where I is going to be more than 10, which is no longer going to satisfy this condition, I less than or equal to 10. And at that point, the loop is going to stop execution. So let's save this and want to see the result we get. So we can see our multiplication table displayed. In the first line, we have 5 times 1, which is 5. Next, we have 5 times 2, which is 10. 5 times 3, 15. 5 times 4, 20. 5 times 5, 25, then 30, 35, 40, 45, and finally 5 times 10, 50. And after this, the program execution comes to an end. This is because, as we specified in our program, we keep executing this particular block of code so long as the condition I less than or equal to 10 is satisfied or is met. So as the value of I keeps on incrementing, as we can see down here, it is first of all 1, then 2, then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then after that, at the final level, we are going to increment the value of I by 1 again, which is going to be 11. And it is no longer going to satisfy the condition I less than or equal to 10. So that is how to use a while loop. Now let's see how we can write this our same program using a do while loop. A do while loop is a loop which starts executing the body of the program at least once before checking the given condition. So let's see how we can modify this same program to be written with a do while loop instead. So in order to use the do while loop, I will simply cut this part, and then I'm going to start the loop with the keyword do. And then after do, we follow it with a set of curly braces, and within the curly braces we'll write the body of the loop, which is going to be same as what is already there, what was with the while loop. And then the difference is that it's at the end of this loop, after the closing curly brace for the body of this loop, we are going to now put the condition which is to be checked. Do all of this while I is less than or equal to 10. So we put the condition at the end instead. That is why it is a do while loop. We do first, we do by executing the body first before checking the condition. This means that since the condition is checked only after executing the body of the loop for the first time, it means the body must be executed at least once regardless of if the condition is met or not. So for this our particular program, the result is going to be same as that of the while loop because the logic of the loop is still the same. The only difference is how it is structured, meaning that we first execute the body once before we check the condition. So now let's save it and run again. Okay, we see that we still get the same result. 5 times 1 equals 5 down to 5 times 10 equals 50. But the structuring of our loop is different this time around because the way we use the do while loop is slightly different from the while loop. Now let's see how to do the same thing which we have already done here with the while loop and do while loop, but this time around with another loop called the for loop. So the for loop simply permits us to keep executing a particular block of code for a fixed number of iterations. This loop is best for iterating over a range of given values. So let's see how to achieve the same result for this our program but using the for loop this time around. So for the for loop, I will write the keyword for followed by parenthesis. And then now instead of just writing the condition within this parenthesis like we saw with the other types of loops, it is going to require some more things. So I'm going to first start by writing the first thing in the parenthesis, which is going to be the initialization condition. So I'm going to specify that my value of I is 1. I could still modify the value of I and put another value like 2. I could modify the value of I here, but since we want to multiply our number variable by all the integer numbers between 1 and 10, that is why we will maintain the value of I, which is 1. Now here is where I will specify the condition to be checked. My condition is going to be same as in the other loops, which is going to be I less than and equal to 10. And then now I'm going to put the increment statement, which is I plus plus. So in the while loop and do while loop, we put our statement I plus plus at the end of the body of the loop, but in the for loop we put it at the beginning of the loop instead. Now follow this by a set of curly braces. Within the curly braces now I will write the body of the loop, which is the same body as we already saw in the other types of loops. Okay, so now we come to the end of our loop in the next line. We don't have to write I plus plus like we did in the other loops again like this, because we have already done that here at the beginning of the loop, so this line is not necessary. And then another thing you should note is that with the for loop, you can actually declare this our variable I within the for loop itself. So I can simply remove this line from here, or let me actually just comment it first, and then I can say my int. So I'm actually declaring the variable I within this particular for loop only, and this is still going to work, but I prefer actually declaring the variable I out of the loop. This is because by doing this way, we can have multiple for loops and we simply use the same variable I rather than declaring it for each different loop. You can do any one that you want, but this is my personal preference. Now let's go on the program to see the result. And we see the result is displayed, which is same as the result for the other different loops we have been seeing. So that is how to use for loops in Java. We are going to see more about the other type of loop, which is the augmented for loop, shortly in this video, because I want us to first of all talk about arrays before seeing that particular type of loop, since it is best to use it when working with arrays or other sets of values like arrays.